Maasai community, and Kalakuta will ask you questions. So maybe the floor will be open for them, and we can discuss.
Those 3. Then we can go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kimuzi. If I can go first. Thank you so much for the introduction and also for our listeners on this very interesting topic. Most of you may remember, or some of you may remember, in 2021, there was a fire within Loldaiga Conservancy in Laikipia, which was caused by the British Army while in the process of training. So following up on that fire, I did begin a class action suit, and I did take the matter to the Environmental and Land Court in Nanyuki. So not to dive so much on the case due to time, the pertinent questions, or the basic question we can ask ourselves, is why and what were the British Army doing in a conservancy? So the basic meaning of a conservancy should be a safe haven where animals can be able to, stay out of these human disturbance and out of human activities. A conservancy, in other words, is supposed to be a place where the animals can find their peace. So when we have an army, we have soldiers extensively and intensively training within a conservancy, doing all kind of military maneuvers, using low-flying helicopters and scaring these animals from what would be their safe haven. And we have to ask ourselves, what then is this conservancy where we shall have, the most lethal of human activities, which is military training? And they come with a lot of weapons and munitions, some of them that are very toxic and are known to us. Sometimes they leave unexploded ordnances within these conservancies. And you can imagine what would happen of an elephant which steps maybe on a grenade left lying idle after the training exercise. Or we should ask ourselves, what then is the impact of maybe munitions like white phosphorus that they use within these ranges? What will be the impact and effect of these toxic munitions to these animals that are supposed to be in a safe haven? And to answer this question, maybe I can dive a little into the historical context of this and move a little back to the 1904-1911 Maasai Agreement, which led to the ceding of this land that is now, has been now left to conservation. After the 1904 and 1911 agreement, of course, there is a notable case by the Maasai in 1913 where they moved to the High Court against that agreement, and they lost on a technicality basis. They claimed that that agreement was not enforceable. But again, they lost due to some technicality, and their land was now ceded to these white colonialists, and they were moved to now Narok, Kajiado, and Tanzania. There is a movie, maybe some of us might have seen it, on the Battle of Laikipia. And they were trying to drive a narrative that all these issues, including what my learned friend Uganda has mentioned, on these budgetary issues and everything, and this conflict that arise. And to answer the bigger question in this is that, and borrowing up also on what I've mentioned earlier on the Maasai Agreement and this land in Laikipia and many other parts of Kenya. When the British or when the colonialists came to Africa, the understanding of land in Africa, and I want to say this quite clearly because it can help us answer and get solutions to some of these issues. The understanding of land in the African context was very different from the understanding of land in the white man's context. The understanding of land in the African context is like what we understand of the ocean as at now. If you happen to be probably maybe at Diani in Mombasa, and someone comes and tells you, sell me 5,000 or 5 acres of this ocean, what you'll do is actually laugh at them and cut a bad deal and asking yourself, what will this fool do with 5 acres of the ocean? And that was the understanding of Africans. When Lanana was signing the 1904 and 1911 agreement, he could not understand what the colonialists will do with this land. They want the whole of Laikipia or thousands and thousands of land. So they could not understand whether these guys will put this land in a bag and carry it back to London. Actually, almost at the same time, the Kikuyus were selling Mount Kenya for 20 sheep. There is a white man as recent as 1965 who had a title deed to Mount Kenya, which he had bought for 20 sheep, simply because the Africans could not understand how someone would buy land. Land to them was like an ocean. You can own what you get from the ocean, but you can't own the ocean. So you can own a fish that you get from the ocean, but you can't own the ocean. You can own a pot of water that you draw from a river, but you can't own the river. So land was communally owned. The Maasais knew the extent of their land, and the Kikuus knew the extent of their land. So did the Kambas, so did the Luos, so did almost every other Kenyan community. So what they brought this aspect of now private ownership and titles to land. And then independence came. And most of these white colonialists who knew that now this independence may pronounce that this land may be nationalized or transferred, they came up with the concept of now conservation. Now this is where we get to our main topic today. So the people who were initially poachers rebranded themselves as conservacists so as to legitimize the land that they had owned illegally or land that they had ceded or taken from communities illegally. So they brought in the aspect of conservation. And from this conservation, they have been now mutating and rebranding to so many other things, including now carbon credit, which Dr. Ogana has quite dealt with in a deeper way. And permit me to mention a few things, borrowing up from also much of what I've done. In Laikipia, for instance, many people know that almost close to half of the county is owned by just less than 40 white landowners. In Laikipia, the British Army, for instance, trains in almost 8 conservancies, and they pay millions of shillings in terms of training fees. Following up on that fire incident, I did follow up on on trying to understand why they were training in a conservancy in the first place. At Loldaiga Conservancy was owned by Robert Wells. Robert Wells is a former colonialist whose grandfather, Robert Wells, took over 20,000 acres of land, which has been given now to the British to train partly in over 20,000 hectares of land. The entire land is over 49,000 acres of land. There is close to Loldaiga, there is Olenaishu. And the British Army trained on 12,000 acres of land at Olenaishu. There is a Mpala Ranch, and then at Mpala Ranch, they've been given 4,000 hectares of land to train within Mpala. There is Suyan. Suyan, they have over 2,000 hectares of land. There is Olmaiso. Again, they have 12,000 acres of land. There is Sosian. At Sosian, they have 5,000 acres of land. There is Oldoño Lemporo. Again, they have 7,000 hectares of land for training. And at Chololo, they have 6,000 hectares of land. All these conservancies are owned by colonial era families. And when the British Army pays this money to them, because they pay for between the years when I started focusing on this, between 2010 to 2016, they had paid over 7 million euros in terms of training fees to these conservancies owned by colonial era farms. Most of these conservancies do not even have an account in Kenya. For instance, Loldaiga, they've been getting their money in Liechtenstein, which are tax havens, beyond the purview even of our Kenya Revenue Authority. So we are in a situation where our land has been illegally, or which was taken from Kenyan communities illegally, and has been used in the name of conservation to legitimize an already illegal transaction, and to the detriment of vulnerable communities. And the bigger, what has made them to actually be doing all this is because most of us have not been in the know-how of what has really been happening. When for instance, taking to or narrowing down to conservation and the relationship between like these private conservancies and KWS, I have never seen such a relationship before. It's like having a private teacher with government teachers teaching in your private school. So you as the owner of this private school are incurring zero expenses because the teachers are public, they are paid by the public taxpayer. And that explains why we have private conservancies. But the kind of, KWS paid by the taxpayers are managing these conservancies. But now this is where it even gets more interesting. if you happen to be living, or a farmer, a small-scale farmer, maybe Kimuzi with 10 acres of maize alongside a conservancy like Loldaiga owned by Robert Wells, and the British come and start training and scaring these wild animals with their explosives and munitions, and the elephant escape the conservancy and attack your 10 acres of land or the maize here. So what happens is you will be asked to go and file for a claim at KWS. And KWS means you and I, because it's funded by the taxpayers. So we have the taxpayers paying for the losses that are accrued as a result of an activity of some other entities. So we, the taxpayers, bear the losses, but the profit flow directly to these private landowners who own these conservancies. So Robert Wells, for instance, will get all the benefits that come with this training. And of course, I've said that they've received over 7 million euros within like 4 years, when, for the time before this agreement, the Defense Cooperation Agreement between Kenya and UK was renewed. Loldaiga alone has earned over 1.2 million euros. So someone who's earning this much money will not, is not even, when you accrue losses because of his activity, and these conflicting uses of a sensitive ecosystem or environment, because you have training, you have tourism, you have these carbon credit, you have leasing of these even conservancies to communities. I mean, you have all these conflicting activities which all channel money directly to you at the expense of vulnerable communities, and again, even adding a burden to the Kenyan taxpayers through the KWS. So when we speak about the conservation,
Kevin,
yes,
the worst thing is they use these. They come to these hotels like tourists, and they use these people as their local dancers and waiters. Like, they abuse these people in so many ways.
correct. That correct. That is quite true. And at the moment, I've documented over close to 40. Who've been abandoned in Nanyuki, especially by these foreigners, and when we say that tourism is a foreign earner to the country, the truth of the matter is, yes, there's a lot of dollars that come through tourism, but the question is, where do this money end? Does that dollar that goes to Loldaiga, does that dollar that goes to maybe Savo reach the Kenyan populace, or there are other entities and organizations here, including these conservancies, including, as Oganda said, the TNC, and number of other institutions like Olpajeta, one of the conservancies again. They pride themselves in having the only remaining white northern rhinos. I didn't know Olpajeta Conservancy, their accounts are held in UK. Actually, TNC financed for the purchase of Olpajeta. So when people come to see these endangered white rhinos at Olpajeta, does that dollar flow to the Kenyan populace? And to sum it up, let me read Article 66.2, because there is need to have solutions also, so that we are not only discussing about problems. Article 66.2 of our Constitution provides that all investment in property must benefit local communities and their economies. I have never seen such a beautiful provision in our constitution. I mean, we have a very beautiful constitution, but for this provision, it goes a long way in me crediting this constitution, because it's very clear that It's not about benefiting. They will come and do some small CSR here and put some iron sheet in a school and buy a tank for the school, and they want everyone to clap for them because they're buying water tanks. But the constitution is saying, look clearly, it is benefit the local communities and their economies. So, for instance, in Laikipia, where we have majority Maasai pastoralists, the question should be, how is this investment in carbon credit benefiting that pastoral, that farmer that got harder in Laikipia? How is this investment in carbon credit benefiting them? And if then there is no benefit that are flowing to these communities, then we can only say that those activities are unconstitutional. They are not economically benefiting these communities as they ought to do, as provided for in our constitution. So we need a lot of framework. We need a lot of legal action and emancipation, as you're doing, Kimuzi, which is very good. And when we sensitize our people and they have the knowledge and know-how of what is happening, and I think from there we can be able to develop sustainable solutions. We need these actions on as they say. We don't dispute that there is a climate change, but we only dispute on this climate financing, and where the money flows. The question is, who benefits from these carbon, who benefits from these climate change issues? Because there is a lot of climate financing, but the question is, does this climate financing really benefit the very people who are made deplorable by the actions or the consequences of climate change? That's all I wish to say.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for that educative piece. You have really enlightened us, and I'm so happy for the time that you gave us to make us understand more the legal aspect of it. So, Kalakuta, you can ask some few questions, then Mordecai can pick up from there, then Elikwaita can give us his experience from the Narok side.
Yes, thank you very much, Kimuzi. So I guess I have two questions really, and this really is to kind of get a bird's eye view of kind of what is happening, and this will be kind of a philosophical question and a political question to it. So the philosophical question is this. So I guess initially, and I think Kubai, if I'm getting the name correct, touched on this, which is when the colonizer came to this continent, I mean, African continent, the view of land was very different from the view of land in the Western Hemisphere. And I guess to justify the lie that they needed to privatize land, they incorporated, they adopted a certain philosophy of someone called Garrett Hardin, who was actually a white supremacist. I mean, he was also a eugenicist. I mean, he believed that, overpopulation was a very, I suppose, urgent kind of concern for human beings. But anyways, that is a distraction. And essentially, the philosophy that is that of tragedy of commons, which essentially postulates that individual people who participate in the sharing of some common resource will ultimately misuse this resource. So it wasn't the good of the resource for it to be privatized, because that's only when people can actually take care of things. This is ultimately essentially what underlies the capitalistic philosophy view of the world. But in this case, it's applied specifically to ecological systems. However, this has been debunked, and somebody won actually a Nobel Prize in economics for doing so. Elena Ostrom, I believe, in 2009 was awarded the Nobel Prize in economics for disproving this philosophy, essentially. And she did it just by essentially just studying local communities, so pastoral communities, and the way that they have shared communal resources. So my question really to Ogara is whether or not, in his view of this conservancies, he sees this philosophy again and again, because I think it is kind of the lie that is underlying all of this need to take away things from being communally owned to being privately owned, or really the deeper idea that people cannot share land as a resource. It needs to be privatized for it to become used in a correct way. So I guess that would be my question in terms of what underlies this. Of course, what is the lie that they are using to, I suppose, justify this privatization of communally owned land? And the other question is some of the political angle of it, which is really the question of Laikipia, which unsurprisingly has been brought up again by Kevin. And essentially, and this is somewhat speculative on my end. So if you look at Laikipia, it looks almost as though it's a testing ground for the political fitness of a presidency even. So, for example, when Kuki Galman was shot a while back, maybe 2017, I believe, Boris Johnson actually was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he actually came to Kenya for this very reason. At that time, Ruto actually went to Laikipia and gave a shoot to kill order because of this. So, in a sense, you can sense that Laikipia is really kind of the jewel of colonial of kind of this of the empire, if you would, in a sense that, for example, the Queen knew that she began the Queen when she was somewhere in Laikipia, I believe. Ian Craig, the founder of NRT, is very close with the royal family. I mean, they attended, for example, the wedding of the prince and so on. So they're very close. So to some extent, Laikipia becomes a kind of how you treat Laikipia kind of determines whether you get approval from Wale Watuoko you, in a sense. So you can see this because, I mean, every other president who has, become a Kenyan president has never actually talked about Laikipia, which, as again, Kevin was more knowledgeable about this, as already mentioned, is really just a place that is owned by very few people. I mean, people owning 100,000 hectares of land. I mean, I don't think that should be something permissible to do. No human being should own that amount of land. And also, I mean, locally, of course, that is kind of from a national view, but also locally, and this again has been touched again by Muzi, and again when he talks about the violence that is present in these areas. So of course locally also, and I don't know, and I mean this is kind of why I'm asking whether there is certain an influence of these conservancies on local politics. So to the extent that, in a sense, they determine who becomes kind of the MP. I mean, depending on whether or not that person is aligned with, the approach to conservancy. So I can only remember one person. I think the name is Limpurkel, if I remember correctly. And Limpurkel has been kind of in a lot of trouble, going from from court case to another, just because he is very opposed to this. So I guess I would like to, ask Mordecai to kind of answer some of this, and as well, I'd like to, kind of echo Mordecai's insistence that, of the scientific unsoundness of carbon credit. I mean, I'm not an expert on the topic, but I suppose just by knowing a little bit about chaotic systems and how they work, you can really tell that even scientifically speaking, carbon trading is just very unsound, in the sense that even if I was to plant a tree now, which will take about 10 years to grow, if I pollute continuously for 10 years waiting for that tree to have grown by that, to recapture what I've, what I've released into the atmosphere, it is not obvious that will actually recalibrate the effects of, the amount of polluting you've done, because it is, of course, very important when the polluting stops, because stopping right now versus stopping 5 years into the future makes a huge difference. But yeah, so just wanted to echo the kind of the political unsounding of this. Yeah, I guess that is those are the two questions that the other one is kind of more like a comment more than it is a question, which is TNT, the Nature Conservancy, I believe, released a report immediately after the Auckland Institute released a report on NRT, for example. And of course, this report really essentially just said that Auckland Institute was lying, because the report by the Auckland Institute, for the listeners who don't know perhaps, was essentially echoing what the local communities have been saying, and what other reports have essentially said, which is that what this conservative is claiming to do is actually not what is happening. And this report eventually allowed, I suppose, NRT to go back to selling carbon credits and so on. So that is just a kind of comment to echo essentially what Ogada had said already. But that will be the questions I have from my end. But thank you very much, Kimuzi, and thank you, Ogada, as well, for taking your time to be with us.
Okay, thank you. I'll just tackle those couple of questions briefly. First of all, conservancies A lot of people struggle with the concept of what a conservancy. Conservancy is a mongrel. It defies any proper definition. There's private ones, there's community ones, there's NGO ones, and all this kind of thing. But what I'd say at this point, conservancy is a structure created to enable land to be someone to control land without buying it, to control it through some funny agreement and that kind of thing. So the conservancy model is it's a dangerous tool in the way it's amorphous. It's like a pliers which can be used to do wiring, or it can be used to torture people. So that's what the conservancy is today. That's what the conservancy model is. Looking at philosophically, we need to understand something about Laikipia. Laikipia is an enclave. It's a colonial enclave in Kenya. There are many ways in which Laikipia is different from other parts of the country. Things like land ownership, the documentation thereof, I mean, in terms of those of us here who may own land, you have your title deed, LR number, stamp duty payment, and these kind of things. Those things, if at all those things have come to Laikipia, it was after 2014. Because until back then, even the ownership of these lands were not recorded in government. It is also not a coincidence that the British Army Training Unit is based in Nanyuki. Because there are many, if you have to talk of safely training with armaments, there are many parts of the country that are more sparsely populated and safer to do this than Laikipia. But the British Army being based in Nanyuki is not a coincidence. It is to protect certain interests, and those are facts that are out there. So there is influence, and I know Matthew Lempukel got into all sorts of trouble for questioning some of these things, but I suspect these were agreements that were reached and signed before that strange thing which we referred to as independence in 1963. So there's a lot we still don't know, and there's a lot we still need to learn. And the arrival of Boris Johnson directly to Laikipia in 2017 was a very telling thing. Without any local protocol, no local minister, no local leadership. That was a very telling thing. So we need to be careful with conservancy. Is something we need to be careful with. For example, the Magadi soda lease is expiring, and instead of simply returning that land to the Kajiado Maasai people who are evicted from there, because it was done 1924, so even those families who are evicted from there, I'm sure their descendants are still around and about in Kajiado. One of the things they've been trying to do is to turn it into a conservancy. And that shows you how useful the conservancy is as a tool for annexation of land. And our government, just 2-3 days ago, there was a video where the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife was saying that Kenya government has actually started funding conservancies using taxpayers' money to fund NGO amorphous structures rather than funding KWS. This shows you the sort of intellectual poverty that bedevils the entire Ministry of Tourism. No one there has any idea what they're doing. But that is the predicament we have. So there are a lot of questions, as the Kalakuta said. A lot of them are philosophical. We have to think very carefully, what are we doing and who are we doing it for? Because those are the key questions. The crisis is not that we are running out of elephants or adverts or something. The crisis is that our birthright is being taken away and being facilitated. And those taking it are being facilitated by those we think are our leaders. Yeah, we have the question from now.
Okay, thank you so much. There is a phrase they was asking people what is a what actually to just take what Kalakuta was saying, what actually carbon create, how do you offset carbon or how do you do this? And somebody was was telling the other it was two whites in the or in an interview, and one was telling the other one it's like when you lie to your wife, when you cheat on your wife, so you have to buy her a gift or buy her a present so that she doesn't become mad. And people were like, how is it working like that?
Yeah, yeah. It's the same sort of dishonest transaction. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and there is still a Baseless Basile who want to ask you a couple of questions, Ogada, and Eli Koita will tell us his experience from Narok. So maybe Eli Koita can talk to you and ask you some few questions. But there is the other terminology they wanted to ask you about is the NRP. Is it registered under land trust or there is a title deed about the land? Another one was this terminology like carbon financing, carbon neutral, net zero, like greenwashing, carbon sequencing, carbon offset, carbon footprint, and the carbon trading.
Sorry, I didn't get the second one, but the first thing about the registration of NRT, I have a copy of a certificate where NRT is registered as a company, and it's got certain shareholders that who are named on the certificate. So it's not it's sort of a chimera that exists in various spaces where it jumps from space to space, evades responsibility, evades ethical questions, including taxation, and it's a very useful vehicle because it's just a mercenary. NRT can be turned into anything one wants it to be. It can trade livestock. It can grab land. It can trade carbon. It can trade beadwork and all those things. But it's just a chimera. I don't
I,
know what it is. Yeah.
I had actually read about the British guy born in Kenya. I think the name was Ian Craig that owns almost 62,000 of land in NRT. Maybe they're the
He's one of the
sole. So,
shareholders.
yeah, maybe because I had read about it, and there was even a guy in like Kipe who was saying, "I don't know how I got the land. I just found myself with the land." It's so this is something that's happening in Kenya, and it's so sad. And I was watching the other day the DW documentary that they
Yeah.
released 2 days ago about the conservancies and how these people were denying them to gain entry to ask some questions. You know the carbon companies, the ones which are offsetting in maybe the US or in Europe, they actually allow any investigative journalists to come and ask them questions. But the NRC, I saw they were making calls. Even the DCI were calling the DW team and they were telling them to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. They have the power.
Okay, Elikoita can ask you the questions and then Basel, then maybe we can you can wind up Ogada after.
Okay.
Yes, good evening,
Good
guys.
evening.
The the only thing I want to talk is about the Masai Mara and how it is being run, and the issue about that is what is affecting the Masai people in those areas. So the first thing is about the county and national government. Every county or the national government official must have a land there that he must buy or grab in all the ways. Others even they even take the advantage of the poor people to take the land by force or by use of money to give the fake titles to the landowners and later claim the land. Others are even building the camps there or their homes and live there. The other issue is about the that thing you're talking about, the carbon. The non-government officers are scamming the Maasai people. They don't want to tell them about the advantages of the carbon. They don't want them to enjoy the advantages they have. They just bring the projects, they give to their own relatives, run it by themselves, and have it an advantage for themselves for it. Another thing is about a company that is running the whole Mara, but I don't want to mention it. It is being run by some few individuals or even by a family. Imagine one family having 5 managers in the same Masai Mara Wildlife Conservancy. The same company have 5 managers and have around 15 workers from the same family working in the same area, earning the same amount. And the CEO of the said company earns around 1.2 million a month. And the company and the CEO, I mean, does not even have any degree or does not even have a Form 4 leaver certificate. You have dropped out of Form 2 and is running the whole Mara or the whole conservancy just because of politics. The person right now is being run by William Ruto's in the TX. They run together in those conservancies. It is just being politicized. The people there are being, I don't know what. The people are looting. Politicians are eating money that is supposed to be enjoyed by the community.
Actually,
Even the community does not have any roads.
actually,
They are just told,
Ogada said that these organizations need people who just exhaust for yes men. So that's why they are running the organization like that. Continue.
You're getting muffled.
it,
You're getting very muffled. Very hard to hear.
I'm saying that those organization companies are being run by, let me say, the illiterate people, if I say that word. Do you still hear me?
Yeah, go on. We are loud and clear.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. And then the same area, let me say the Masai Mara, does not even have any good road or a good hospital that people are proud of. The money there are being taken to the government officials, and then the government official will take them for themselves. Because there is no, even the agreement that was signed last was signed on 2015, and it was a 35-year deed. That means the people cannot claim the amount of money to be increased or their salaries that are being paid to the landowners because the agreement was already signed. Even when the economy is being raised or it's being too much, the people cannot claim that there should be amount to be increased. They are just suffering, earning 5,000 per month because of the land, being given loans, and then the money to be deducted on their salary. So like people are just working for the tourism. They are just the slaves of those people. And this government are killing those people. They don't want them to see the light in the tunnel. The roads there are never built because they are told when you build this road, your livestock will be dead, the cars will be running and kill you, your livestock, kill people, just to scam them. Because when you follow the roads that are already built in the government books, all those roads are tarmac in the history. But none of them even have anything. When it rains, every car stops. No going to Iton or Talik, any place there. You just stop wherever you are and sleep or find yourself somewhere to make yourself comfortable. The camp, every government official have shares in every camp. Landowners just wait for the end month to go and receive a penny, just to let them cool down and they assume that everything is running right. The Masai Mara people need to talk about a lot of things.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for now.
Okay, maybe you can have Basele, then I'll take both of them together.
Okay,
but
thank you. Thank you, Kimuzi, my brother, for hosting this. This has long been forthcoming, especially for those of us from northern Kenya who are at the receiving end of what these scammers are doing. You see, the threat, a pastoralist with livestock, is a very rich man who is very independent. These people, their plan is because their threats to them not accessing this land is a pastoralist who is independent, a pastoralist with livestock. Their plan is to ensure that there are no livestock, or if there are very few livestock in northern Kenya, in those rangelands, so that they can freely do what they are doing in those lands. My brother Mordecai forgot to say when he was mentioning what that organization can do. He forgot to say that they can actually kill. They have full armory, and they can actually kill. I have been involved in part of some of these investigations, even including the black carbon investigation that was done by Survival International. All these things come to bite. You dare these things, you realize how powerful these scammers are. Now back to what carbon is. You know, uh, the no- they it has metamorphosed. I think last time it used to be a project under NRT. Now it has metamorphosed into something that we don't even know what it is. Now they say it's being run independently, but the officers are within NRT offices. They have bullshit. And one thing they are very good at doing is, buying out politicians and leaders from northern Kenya. Uh, Recently, I attended the Pastoralist Leadership Summit that took place in Wajir somewhere in December. And these guys had a whole booth, trying to scam government officials. And I realized that they even have one of the longest serving members of parliament from northern Kenya now serving as an employee of NRT. And no, apart from being an employee of that organization, he is also sits in the board of KWS. So a former CEO, MD for KWS, currently serves as the chairperson of this amorphous organization. So you realize that this thing, it runs so deep, and the whole essence of it is to disenfranchise pastoral communities. Once you disenfranchise them, you have no single threat to you accessing that land and using it for what you want to do it. They have introduced training. I know my brother Mordecai would understands how they introduced that training. They are calling it Ujuzi Manyatani. I call it bullshit Manyatani, where they're training Morans to ride motorbikes and to repair radios and telephones. Because they know that a Moran with cattle is very independent. So when you create dependency, they are told you will sponsor your kids through carbon money. And these people, you are telling them you will sponsor their kids using carbon money. You are telling them that we are not doing anything on your land. All we are doing is we are picking hewa chafu. That's what the communities are told. Tunabeba mnyamba ya ng'ombe, and that is what we are selling as carbon. And therefore, communities know that they are contributing nothing. This is just free money that comes to them. But in reality, if you look at how these carbon projects work, is that for you to sink carbon, you have to, they call it grazing patterns, controlled grazing, allow regeneration, and all that nonsense. But at the end, you have communities that are being impoverished. You have communities that are being kicked out of their land. And they have created a cabal of elders. They are calling them, whatever, their council of elders. It's a cabal of retirees, people who retired. Some of them retired from military, and after retirement, you are at 60, you realize you don't even have a home, and a home is built for you. Because a home is built for you. Again, this is your failure. You failed over 50 years working or 30 years working for government, and now you come, someone gives you a good salary, and your only assignment is to sell off your people. I wish if any one of them are in this conversation, I will tell them. Because one thing they do is, even the best of the brains in this country, they can afford the best of the professors. They can afford a former MD of KWS. These guys can afford anyone. They can afford anyone and everyone they want. And therefore, because of that, you have even professionals, and I will call them silly professionals from Northern Kenya, who work for these people. And their work, they are watchmen. Like, remember the colonial watchmen who are working for the Muzungu? That is all
The
they are
home
doing.
guards.
The home guards, yes. Thank you. The home guards selling their soul, the soul of their community for pennies. And it's so sad that this is happening. And again, I think many times we've talked about this. You look at, I did some basic GIS, and the basic GIS that I did helped me. I took maps of these conservancies and placed them on the cadastral map of Kenya. The cadastral map that was developed by the colonial government. Cadastral map that includes where minerals are in this country.
And oil.
These precious stones. they actually feed that areas that are there are minerals. That is the exact point where these conservancies are. Again, you'll map the conflicts in this country. You know where the conflicts are. They are in northern Kenya. They are in parts of
Baringo.
Baringo and West Pokot. Baringo and West Pokot. They are in Turkana. Now they are in northwestern Turkana. No, northwestern Uganda. They are in northeastern parts of this country, and that is exactly where these conservancies are. And therefore you realize that these are people who have a plan. Now, we don't just want to complain about their plans. What then can we do as people? Because again, the independence of this country, in as much as yes, it's bullshit independence. There's no independence we gained. They were just because again, Mordecai and I and a few others, we were calling ourselves errant natives. When we started this conversation, we found that they also sponsored an alternate group that is fighting for the same thing we are fighting, but in reality for them, it's a marathon. They are running a marathon, so that when they get to the in form of fighting for independence, but then when they go to the finish line, they handed the baton again to the colonial. Kindly, we need to come together. We need, call for action. We need to ensure that we liberate these people. Because, liberation is required. Because again, these carbon schemes and all this bullshit, you can't be telling me that because you can sponsor kids 10,000 shillings bursary, we should, cede our land. We cannot. We need, and the sovereignty of this country requires all of us. Thank you. I know I can really talk, but I know time is limited. Next time, we could even have more conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Basele. Now, my response to these last two people. First of all, the Masai Mara, and here I'll share a personal sentiment. I do not visit Masai Mara as a matter of principle. When we were developing, I was involved in the development of Mara management plan. And white people settled there. By white people, I mean elites. I mean, there are even black whites. Even our former president has a home there. There's something there's a place in the Mara that looks like Runda or Loresho, where it's. So it was about removal of the poor. The land agreements, these 5,000 people are being paid per month. I think some of these are the shares they're holding is 50 acres. Those of you who have farmed or do anything, 50 acres is a wealthy person. If you own 50 acres, you're not supposed to be earning the equivalent of one small goat per month. And that's what I say. We need to understand philosophically that tourism, and you can quote me, tourism as we practice it in Kenya is not a livelihood. It is a dependency. That is why a vital ingredient for tourism is poverty amongst the indigenous people in the place where tourism is being done. That's the only way you will have someone work for a month and you pay him a salary equivalent to 3 goats when he could actually be having 1,000 goats. And as Basele said, ever since colonial days, a wealthy, self-dependent pastoralist has been considered a problem by government. And I've taught many students from the United States, and we go with them to the livestock market in Isiolo. You check out the price of goats, find out a goat equivalent to maybe $60-70 per goat. We go out to the field, we meet a pastoralist with 700, 800, 900 goats or 1,000 and something. And I ask the students, why do you think this guy is poor and you are coming to save him? How much do you have in your bank account versus what he has right here? And that is why we need to understand wealth and poverty. It is poor people who are coming here to call us poor. We are the wealthy ones. If we were poor, they wouldn't want anything to do with us. If we are poor, what do they want from us? And this is what we have to understand. And those of us in the conservation, wildlife conservation stroke tourism sector, we need to wake up, because 99% of us are functioning as home guards. Useless people who are selling out their compatriots for a few pennies. That is 99% of those in the conservation, wildlife conservation and tourism sector in Kenya. So that's one sector that has to wake up. Again, the engagement, these organizations know that's how colonialism works. When you come in, you grab the families or people who have power amongst the communities and put them in positions of leadership. You put them in your pocket, and that's how they control things. The young people are disenfranchised because their elders are put in a pocket. The retired military, retired civil servants that Basele was talking about, these are the heaviest burden, I think, on the shoulder of young Kenyans from these places. But anybody here who has any say on an agreement, I mean, pull out of it. I'm sure there are some lawyers who can help, but the title deed, at the bottom line, the name on the title deed is yours. If there's any agreement that's good, it should never be more than 5 years. It can be renewed. Even our personal lives, there's an agreement even called marriage between two people. It has to be continuously appreciated by both parties. If that ends, the marriage ends. But we have 30-year agreements. People are selling off. 80-year-old elders are signing 40-year agreements. They will not even be there through the duration of the agreement. And this is the problem. We are selling off not just children now, but we are selling even our grandchildren who are unborn. And this is the problem. Colonialism right now does not follow countries' national borders. It follows minerals, resources, forests, conservancies. These are the colonies. They are no longer called countries. They are called conservancies. They are called rangelands. They are called conservancy associations. They are called trusts. They are called all sorts of things. And the colonialists are no longer nations, but Western wealthy capitalists. And conservation scientists and practitioners like myself are the agents and the home guards. So as Basele said, we need to get independence. We need to get independence and grab it, because it will come. And I think those of us, especially who are maybe of the generation of who already have kids, we need to do it for our children. And those who are the youth, we need to question our parents. What is this you are signing? Alafu mimi niende wapi? These are the questions we have to ask. Not even at national levels, at family, community level, because that's where these people are breaking us apart. Not at the national level, they're breaking us at community and family level. So that's where we must act. So I'd just like to, I'd like to end it there, and I'd just like to thank all of you for the time you've taken to attend this Twitter space and keep
Ogada,
asking these questions. Yeah.
just last question
Mogada,
from Farah. Here's last question, a very quick, then we end it.
it's
Okay.
Farah here. I have a very simple question. I like the clarity of mind between you and Basele. But away from even the conservations, Tata Chemicals owns the land between Naserian and Oloika,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically the whole of Magadi.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, mwezi wa saba mwezi wa nane last year, waliengezewa ardhi almost all the way to Shompole Conservancy.
Really?
Yes. So my simple question would be, what happens to the over 1,000 families na hizo maboma zote between Magadi, Oloika, Pakase, and Shompole?
And you know, I and you see, Kajiado is becoming something of a powder, a time bomb. Because a few years ago, the Shompole Lodge was burned down, must be 2011 or something. There was also in Nguruman Conservancy, people marched on, and there's a lot of it. So I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I hadn't heard of that, but I'm not sure if this has been done by the county. I hadn't heard of that, but I'm not sure if this has been done by the county. Government or national government, but whatever
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah.
Oh, I just want to say thank you to all.
Yeah.
And
I'll send you in the DM.
okay, and then for the listeners, you can follow up. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much,
And also,
Agadi, for coming.
Okay,
I'd also
Kuzama,
like to say, yes, I'd also like to say thank you for everybody who's listening, and essentially just to show you kind of the extreme of how this could end is really essentially to point out what is happening in Tanzania to the Maasais in Tanzania.
yeah.
I think that is just a classic case of how extreme this can go, and how this is actually, if you don't take care of it, it will catch up with us very soon.
Yeah. Loliondo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.